the What Now Collaborative. Dan's for to be over here, and Wei Shun Lee, also my co-directors with What Now. We're organising this event in partnership with Zap Architecture to mark the closing of the Pavilion of Protest exhibition you would have seen next door. Paul's going to be our timekeeper for the night. He has various techniques that will keep us to time, and Zora is our chair. Firstly, we'd like to thank the RIBA for kindly permitting us to host this debate in this space, and also to all our speakers here, for which we have many, for taking their time to be a part of tonight. So I'm not really sure how many of you really know about this event, or why you're here, or how you heard about it. Some people refer to it as a talk, a debate, a commentary. But really, the Charter for Change is a consolidation of concerns, questions, as well as propositions about architectural education. Its aim is to form a record of ideas for change, which we will be scribed by this ink drawing by Dan. It's going to be done live before us over the next 2 hours. At the end of the night, you'll be invited to sign this charter so that it can be published, exhibited, and used to make all these propositions reality. Tonight we're going to hear from 8 speakers in a Speaker's Corner style debate using this soapbox. And there will also be a panel discussion with Professor Jeremy Till, Nic Clear and Andreas Lang, and the audience. And together we will gather our thoughts into clear ideas that will then form this charter. So without further ado, let's kick off tonight with the first soapbox speaker, who Wei is going to introduce.
First up on the box is a person who studied his whole course at the University College Dublin. In '98, he was selected as a UK Young Architect of the Year. He's recognised nationally and internationally with numerous awards, and he is currently a lecturer in architecture at the Bartlett's at UCL, and he was made Honorary Fellow of the Royal Institute of Architects in 2001. Please welcome to the box Niall McLaughlin.
My rant is going to be a hit and run. Unfortunately, I've got a sick baby at home, so if you want to say anything to me, you should heckle. I won't be around later on. I want to raise a question about the way in which architecture education is always framed as a discussion between the universities or the academy and the profession. The university standing for experimentation and, let's say, values, and the profession standing for standards and competencies. It seems to me that neither of these institutions have any claim to authority over architectural practice. And the default thought that we have, that it's always a discussion between the two, I think weakens our own architectural practice. We have no obligation as architects to universities or the profession. Let me talk about the profession first of all. The profession is a creature of social modernism. In the 19th century, under pressure from the deracinating, abstract levelling effect of capitalism, architects formed an association of members, and those members pretty quickly entered into a pact with government, in which if government could regulate competence through the profession, then it would allow a certain degree of protection of markets for the members of the profession. For a long time, the protection of markets came through fixing fees, which is no longer legal. But in effect, the protection of title, our ability to only call ourselves architects, is another way of fixing the market. And so what we have is a set of definable competencies which we are formally regulated under, which allows us to protect and control our markets. On the other hand, I think that for me the problem with that is that those definable competencies have to be forensically regulated. And competencies which can be forensically regulated have to be very clearly definable. And in the sense that they're clearly definable, I think that they can be taken over by other disciplines. What is it, when you come to the core of it, that can be regulated through education that couldn't be done, for example, under the new profession of approved inspectors? If we look at the universities, whatever pact the universities enter into with the profession, eventually, the university is a big beast which is interested primarily in original knowledge. The people who it employs as its main teachers are academics, and they are focused on research ratings which give the institution its funding. In that sense, the prime constituency of the universities, I would say, is internal. There is no real incentive to teach basic skills to architecture students because I think that the focus is elsewhere. And they are unable, unwilling, to promote or retain practitioners. And so the values are inward-looking. And I would say that for many universities, that leads to a culture of values which are esoteric, obscure, and sometimes indebted to other stronger disciplines. On the one hand, you might have an indebtedness to positivism, or on the other hand, to the liberal arts. Positivism tends to give you a kind of an architectural pseudoscience, and an indebtedness to the liberal arts gives you what I would see as a series of aesthetic cults. There are certain schools of architecture in London which are quite close to each other, in which for some reason the default virtue in one might be a kind of quiet Puritanism, a sort of a vanishing understatement, and in one, about a mile down the road, a sort of histrionic virtuosity. I'm not sure that either of these are meaningful in terms of the actual practice of architecture. I kind of curl up when I hear Critt's words like rigorous, precise, and research. And so I think that between the profession and the university, architectural students are faced with false disciplines. For example, of normative competence, of positivism, or of aesthetic speculation. And I think in order to become a strong discipline, architecture needs to work out what it is that only architects can only do. If I was going to pay £86,000 for my education, that is what I would expect. And for me, I would say that has got to do with habitation. Our education begins when we observe, conceive, construct, and reflect on habitation. And we need to find a way of doing that for ourselves as a strong architectural discipline if we're to make progress. Thank you.
The second of our speakers or ranters tonight has worked both as an architect in private practice and as an academic for over 20 years. He is the past chair for Skoda and is now the Dean of the Faculty of Architecture and Spatial Design at London Metropolitan University. Please welcome to the box Professor Robert Mull.
Are you going to keep us to 2 minutes? Yeah. I'm not going to start yet.
3 minutes.
It's difficult, 2 minutes to address things that we've spent, and many people in this room have spent the last 10 years fighting for and discussing, with little success, I think, in many ways. I was tempted to call 2 minutes of silence for some of the things that are going to be lost in architectural education: widening access, diversity, freedom of choice, entitlement, inclusivity, etc. But I won't do that. Instead, I'll do what I'm asked to do, which is to rant for a couple of minutes. I think it's worth just stating where we are at the moment in higher education. It needs to be said. Higher education has been privatised. It's been asset stripped, and in many ways punished for its collaboration over the last 10 years with a different government. The entire cost of higher education is to be borne by the students from now on. And the debt that students will acquire is quietly being sold off to the very banks that caused the problem at knockdown prices. If you're an architecture student, you have a very particular privilege. You are sentenced by UK practice and by UK and by EU law to 5 years full-time education, and you will graduate with the highest debt of any student in the system. Why does this matter? It matters because it's wrong, but I would like to highlight another area in which it really does matter. Education and practice as a result of this process will become divided between those who can pay and those who can't pay, and between institutions who will charge and can charge and institutions who won't charge and cannot charge. The effect will be quite pernicious. Education will become increasingly divided